Hi, I'm Julian. That's my name. I build editing experiences. I'm a freelancer of sorts, and what I mostly do at work is build editors for companies, startups, mostly startups. And I do that with JavaScript and in browsers. I am also a member of the Draft.js core team. I don't know, have you guys heard of Draft.js before? Hands up who's heard of Draft.js. Okay. And I maintained Draft.js plugins. I'm sort of trying to, I'm recruiting someone at the moment who'll take over that part. Yeah, I'm into building editing experiences. I love that stuff. And I mostly do that freelance, but I mean, I say mostly, but also I do other stuff as well. Right now, I'm in a full stack role somewhere in London. So the thing with building editing experiences for the browser is you mostly need to use content editable. Who's heard of content editable? Hands up. Yeah. Who's tried to implement an editor with content editable and JavaScript themselves? Yeah. And who found it fun? Oh! Let's talk more. Yeah, so content editable is sort of fun. It was originally developed by Microsoft for front page. Who's used front page? Remember the days when it was easy? Sort of. So they were like, well, let's make our websites editable in the browser, just like with put a tag on, a content editable tag, and then you can edit shit. And IE was really popular at the time, so everybody copied it. Safari copied it, Firefox copied it, and eventually Chrome implemented it as well. But the thing is, there wasn't a spec. So nobody really knew how to implement it, so they just kind of tried to reverse engineer it and implement their own version. And that's a problem, because now we have all these every browser behaves differently, and it's super inconsistent, and it still is to this day. Actually, the W3 spec for content editable, so the standard for content editable is being developed right now, and that's, almost 20 years later? It's insane. But it's getting there, so that's a good thing. So Draft.js is basically this framework developed by Facebook for their editor in Facebook. So when you post a status update or do any kind of rich text where you can add a mention and stuff like that. That's Draft.js, that's powered by Draft.js, and Draft.js is basically an attempt to make content editable play nice. So it's very good. It's very good. It's actively used at Facebook, so it's got to be well tested, right? Facebook has a pretty large user base. The stable release takes care of most content editable quirks, and it has a large community around it. That's sort of what got me into coding editors with React in the browser. But the thing is, I've been doing that for a while now, and I've also used alternative frameworks. When it comes to developing browser, editors in the browser with React, there's really only two choices. One is Draft.js. The other is SlateJS. Who's heard of SlateJS? Yeah. Nice one. SlateJS is really cool, by the way. Worth checking out. It's who's heard of Segment, the company Segment.io? The founder, Ian Storm Taylor. That's him. He slaved away at SlateJS, which is like an alternative to Draft.js, and has built a huge community around it. And they're progressing really fast and catching up with Draft.js and probably surpassing Draft.js. Because one of the problems with Draft.js is that it's kind of fallen out of favor internally at Facebook. At least that's what it seems like to me, because it's not getting a lot of love. It's hardly ever updated. Yeah, and among that's one problem, but also it's massive. It's 147 kilobyte minified. It depends on immutable JS. And yeah, it has a complicated and flexible API. So really, it's like an internal tool that they open sourced, and it has limited use, I'd say. Yeah, and the open source repository, I've become a little bit frustrated with the Draft.js as a project, because it doesn't seem to be very well maintained by Facebook. It hardly ever gets updated. There have been plans to introduce certain features that the community was eagerly awaiting, and they've never been implemented. And so for what that meant for my freelance work is that I couldn't really recommend Draft.js anymore because it lacked some of the features that my clients needed. So I basically started thinking about how can I do this from scratch? Can I implement something from scratch that's better? Just as like a, off-the-cuff thought experiment, like in the shower or on the way to work, or and it's been bugging me, and I've been obsessing over it. And in my spare time, I've now arrived at my third attempt at working out a solution. So let me take a step back and explain how this solution is addressing the problems. One of the things with Draft.js is that and SlateJS as well, and a lot of other editing frameworks, is that it's based on tree structures. So that's a very simplified tree structure. Here you have, on the right-hand side, you have the representation in text, like say that's your WYSIWYG editor. And on the left you have the states object, right? So there's one line and another line, and then there's a nested line as well. And the problem with that is any kind of operation you make in this WYSIWYG editor is like say, for example, I want to delete this or insert something here. Any kind of manipulation you make through that text, you need to be able to synchronize that with your tree structure here, and that's super complicated. Because say I do this, I delete this bit of text. What's happening here is that this folds into one. So it would look like that, kind of. And in Draft.js and SlateJS, what they do to make this a replayable action, like an atomic action, is they use immutable JS. Because they can just copy the state, manipulate it, and they won't use up too much space because it's an immutable data structure. I could go into immutable data structure now, but I just won't. I'm sorry. All you need to know, it's super complicated to update this, to make updates like this, to map text updates to updates in a tree structure. But the thing is, updating text itself is super easy. So what if you made an edit here, and it would actually translate into like editing a bit of text? If the data structure was actually text, as well as the view structure, then it wouldn't be complicated. So for example, let's say I'm doing this. I can just edit this text here. Ta-da! This is my model. And that's the thought experiment that I had, right? This will all make more sense very soon. So give me a moment. This is the thing I'm working on. It's called Zettel. It's written in TypeScript. This should be an emoji, but it's not. It's tiny. It's like 10 times smaller than any of its alternatives. Oh, that should be an emoji. Why doesn't that work? Damn. It has 0 dependencies, and the state module can be used with any framework. So right now I'm using React to develop stuff, but it can be. I've tried it with Svelte. I made a little prototype with Svelte. I made a tiny little prototype of Vue.js. That seemed to work as well. So the main part of Zettel is a model that you update, and then you use it to render a view. Yeah, and I'm like, one thing that really annoyed me about both Draft.js and SlateJS is that it's very, very complex. It has a huge, they both have huge APIs and bad documentation, and that's something I'd like to improve on. Let's see if I succeed. Also, the core thing, and that's the thing I'm really keen on with Zettel, is that changes are atomic. They're replayable and serializable. They're like, they can be a bit of JSON that you send to a server or across with a push notification or something like that, right? So a quick disclaimer, Zettel is not production ready. I'm the only one working on it. It has intentionally very little test coverage right now because I'm like developing it. It's a framework that I'm sharing work in progress with you, basically. This is how, so let's get to the meat of this. This is how the change object looks like. And this is how you can represent any change in Zettel. And it's that simple. You have, this is a selection, start, end, value. And value is basically a representation of a string, like hello. So let me give you an example. This is how you change the selection. So start, end, free, that would basically mean, what is it? 1, 2, 3. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That would be the selection that represents. Inserting text. So I'm inserting at position 3. I insert hello Vienna. Replacing text. Start and end value are different. And I'm replacing that range with goodbye Vienna. That's an example of inserting styled text. So here you have characters represented as an object that has a char property and a styles property. here, that's how you insert a new block. In this model, the start of a block and the end of a block are a character as well. And that's how I map a tree structure to a flat structure. And which makes it super easy to manipulate the tree structure, because you're not having to think about a tree structure. You only ever think about updating a flat structure, a string or an array, right? This is an example of inserting a custom block, like a YouTube embed, right? Okay, so that was all a very hand-wavy, like example-y type stuff. So hopefully this will make more sense if I now show you some examples. By the way, how are we doing for time?
Like 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes? That sounds about right. Shit, I have no internet. I guess I could use my... Oh, never mind. It's just that image. Imagine there's an image here. Anyway, it's not about the image. So here are examples. Examples of, for example, how I've implemented rich text. Okay, let me go in here. I've got a little surprise here as well. So here's an example of a plain text editor. Let's start with that, plain text. So this is where I can do stuff like you would expect in any normal editor. And the theme?
Yeah.
Which theme?
The editor.
Oh, this theme. Is it hard to read, is it? Ah.
Just make it bigger, I guess.
Is that better? Yeah? Sorry, I didn't know it was that low contrast. Is it easy to change the theme? Hold on.
Okay, that's fine.
Are you sure? I don't know. How do you change the theme?
What is it?
VS Code. Theme? Color theme?
Yeah, Light Visual Studio should work.
Light Visual Studio. Is that better? Yes? Thanks. That's it. Bye. No. Okay. Right. So here we are again. Where are we? Right. This is, so here's some code. We don't need that. Here's, ignore this, by the way. I've been playing around with different names. I was going to call it editable. First I called it Zettel, then I called it editable. I think I'm reverting back to Zettel because editable is kind of too generic, and a friend of mine said you wouldn't be able to, it's not recognizable enough or something like that. If you have an idea for a good name, let me know. Anyway, so here's my raw editor state, and it's just some text. And I use my editor state object to, and I use it with a useState hook. If you guys are familiar with, I hope you guys are familiar with React. And then I render my editor, and it basically receives an editor state prop and an onChange prop. OnChange updates the editor every time I edit the text or do anything with the text. So let's have a look at italic and bold. So right now, the thing with this framework is what's annoyed me so much about Draft.js, for example, is that Draft.js is not very customizable, or it's very hard to. and in some edge cases, like it's impossible. Like if you were to combine Draft.js with a compiler, for example, and wanted to provide syntax highlighting for your custom language, it wouldn't let you do that. And this lets you do everything. You can control the rendering of every part of your editor, whether it's a text fragment or a block or the editor itself. And here you can see there's a prop for intercepting the key down event. And there's a render prop for the style element. So that's how I'm rendering strong, italic, and underlined. But obviously, you could replace this with whatever you want, really. And that's how I want it to be. That it comes with very little default settings, the framework, and you basically add the defaults yourself. Right, so that's how that bit works. That's italic and bold. Let's have a look at block styling. Oh yeah, there you go. There's some headlines. Super impressive. But what that basically does is there you go. Here's how you mark blocks as having different styles. And then here's where I update the editor state to toggle classes. It's not like a ton of code, I guess. But let me get. I'm just going to show you the tree. So this is where Zettel becomes really powerful because of this, the shape of the state, because it's just text, and because text is easier to think about than a tree structure, for example, you can map edits to text, and everything will work as expected. So all these editing operations, they kind of come almost free with a model like that. Whereas if you had an immutable data structure or a tree structure, the updates would be much more complicated. So this tree could be anything. You can literally, let's see, tree. So that's all the tree structure is right now. And I'm just rendering the blocks here, adding the class name of tree node to draw these little lines around the blocks. And that's it. But you could have, for example, you could build like a document editing experience, a rich document editing experience. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of workflowy kind of product, or a Dropbox paper kind of product. The possibilities are really vast. And you can mix and match this with different types of content, whether it's video or images or whatever. I'm working on a prototype with SVG editing right now. Right, now, I hope I'm not running over too much, because I have a little bit of live coding here. So, let me just show you how I'm just going to implement like a quick live markdown editing experience. So let's say what I'm doing here is I'm getting the text of a particular block. And then I'm checking if the text starts with a particular string. And if it does, I'm returning the correlating element. So yeah, that's it. That's how easy it is with this framework, really. So let's say I'm doing that, right? That's H1, yeah? Boom, H1. OK, let's do the same thing for a H2. A H3. Oops. 2. 2 indeed. Let's add a, let's say, what if text equals something like this? We'll return a HR. Oh, we need to close that, I think. Right, so here's H1, H2, H3, and HR. That's it.